A wave of terror descended on the Russian district of Akamdorodok. The sinister case of the Irkutsk Hammer students unfolded. These ordinary-seeming high school students launched a reign of terror, bludgeoning unsuspecting victims from behind with hammers or heavy objects. Their brutal acts were shockingly uploaded onto the internet, turning this into a chilling online horror story. The inhabitants of the area were gripped by fear and frustration, their anger directed at authorities who appeared to do little to stem the tide of violence. What they didn't realise was that the perpetrators weren't lurking in the shadows, but hiding in plain sight. The pair, known as the Academy Maniacs, brutally took the lives of 6 people in just 5 months. This case, marked by its extreme violence and repugnant nature, has been a challenging one to research. The sheer ruthlessness of the crimes and the utter disregard for human life is truly shocking. But before we dive in, I want to let you know that I make videos weekly, so if you want to see my next one, please hit the like button and subscribe if you are new. It really helps me out. Thank you. The city of Irkutsk, nestled in the vast expanse of Siberia, rests just 66 kilometers from Lake Baikal, the world's oldest and deepest lake. Near the heart of Irkutsk, there lies a district known as Akademgorodok, a term that roughly translates to Academy Town in Russian. Living up to its name, the district is home to various universities, institutes and faculties, once predominantly populated by professors and scientists. The demographic did change over time. So who exactly were the Academy Maniacs? The menacing duo was made up of Artem Anufriyev and Nikita Lagtin, both native to Irkutsk, Russia. Born on October 4th, 1992 and March 24th, 1993 respectively, Artem and Nikita found themselves entangled in a dark path from an early age. The truth of their difficult childhoods is as poignant as it is unsettling. Artem grew up without a father figure, a loss that cast a deep psychological shadow over his childhood. Despite court testimonies, the childhood friends painted him in a favourable light, although the scars from his father's departure were unmistakable. His mother, Nina, embittered by her circumstances, further added to the complexity of Artem's upbringing. Nina, who found employment as an insurance company accountant, was characterised by a stern and domineering presence. The faculty at Artem's school, including principals and teachers, consistently found her behaviour to be strange and disruptive. She was quick to raise complaints whenever Artem scored a low grade. During their time at school, students in Russia had a unique logbook in which all their academic scores were noted for parental oversight. To sidestep any issues with Nina, teachers would occasionally give Artem an opportunity to improve a poor grade before committing it to his logbook. However, if Nina uncovered such leniencies, she would rush to question the school and its staff as to why they were concealing information, even leading one physics teacher to refuse to teach Artem's class due to her persistent interference. So, by the 9th grade, the school had to find a substitute teacher to cover for Artem's physics classes. Nina exerted an extreme commanding influence over Artem's life. She scrutinised every single detail, In an extreme instance, they went to the barber's, and Nina was insistent that Artem received a haircut that mirrored her own. Luckily, the barber was able to convince her otherwise. Despite these circumstances, Artem was a dedicated student, excelling in literature and English. He actively participated in various school events and competitions. Simultaneously, he honed his musical talents by attending a guitar class at a music school for 5 years and performing in a local band. Despite his achievements, Artem was perceived as an outsider by his peers since first grade. It was only as his classmates matured towards graduation that he managed to shed this label. However, with his growing popularity, his academic performance dwindled by the 10th grade, and he ultimately graduated with an average academic record. During his final year, his classmates made a commemorative video in which each student shares their thoughts on what happiness is. Artem, standing out from his peers, said, "To be honest, I don't know what happiness is, but I would really like to find out." Post-graduation, he enrolled in the Irkutsk State Medical University and secured employment as a helper at an art museum. Nina raised her son to hate others and believed that they were the chosen ones. He was raised to especially hate on people who lacked intelligence, or more so, homeless people. During the trial, Nina recounted an incident where Artem was assaulted by a group of Armenians. A criminal case was initiated, but due to her disappointment, no one was held accountable. Artem's family received a sum of 50,000 rubles as compensation for psychological damages. Following this incident, Artem, according to his mother, became notably volatile. However, there are accounts suggesting that Artem may have instigated the conflict himself by posting derogatory comments about the Armenian family on social media. The family members confronted him, leading to the altercation. The criminal case was reportedly dismissed due to a reconciliation between the parties involved. Nikita's upbringing mirrors that of Artem's, in that he too was raised without a father. His father and grandparents worked in hydro construction, contributing to the development of the Ulich and Irkutsk hydroelectric power stations. His mother, on the other hand, worked as a sales assistant in a shoe shop. His father, who was from an Ossetian background, left the family during Nikita's formative years. A tragic event unfolded in Nikita's life when his older half-brother from his father's side took his own life following the passing of his mother. This triggered the father's return to the family, but his ability to reconnect with Nikita was hampered by the overwhelming grief and loss of his wife and son. Subsequent departures and returns from the father only resulted in Nikita becoming more disillusioned with him. The final meeting between Nikita and his father occurred when he was 16, an encounter characterized by an awkward silence due to a lack of mutual interests. Nikita maintained an outwardly calm and composed demeanor, but according to his mother, he was considerably introverted and said the very least possible when communicating. Whenever guests visited the household, Nikita opted to retreat to his room instead of interacting with them. During his primary school years, Nikita befriended a boy named Artur Lysenko, who helped him in integrating with his peers. Nikita's mother said, Artur treated Nikita like an object and Nikita didn't know how to reject or disagree. He didn't have personal opinions. I taught him the importance of saying no, and once he learnt that, his friendship with Arta dwindled, and they stopped being friends. Up until 5th grade, Nikita was a good student, known for his exemplary conduct. He often participated in creative competitions and earned praise from his tutors. He was also quite fond of computer games. However, in 2004, despite showing no particular interest in mathematical sciences, he was placed in a mathematics-orientated class based on his test scores. This transition proved difficult for Nikita as he struggled to acclimate to the new classroom environment. In his 2nd year of secondary school, Nikita started to show less interest in his studies. Unlike Artem, he was dismissed from school during his 9th year, and he only sporadically went to college after this. Around the same time, Nikita found himself in a feud with a group of classmates who began to harass him. In retaliation, he pressured one of the bullies for money and burglarized their home. Despite Marina, Nikita's mother, making a formal complaint about the harassers, no action was taken. As these events unfolded, Marina began to devote more time to her work and religious activities, inadvertently ignoring Nikita's needs. Consequently, Nikita distanced himself from the church. Seeing his deteriorating state, Marina sought psychological help for her son. The therapists suggested that Marina provide Nikita with more freedom and not intrude on his personal space. They also made her aware that she was too controlling. Nikita met Artem for the first time at his former friend Arta's birthday party. Nikita found himself in a profound state of depression at this time, confiding his troubles in Artem, who offered his support in return. Nikita's mother noted that as other kids didn't like Artem, Nikita began to lose his previous friends. This was because the unfriendly attitude towards Artem was also directed at him. However, Nikita didn't seem bothered by this at all, dismissing his previous friendships as, and quote, childish, fake friendships. Meanwhile, Artelezenko, the kid whose party it was, reported in court that Nikita lost friends due to a sudden transformation. One day he came into school and didn't greet anyone, isolating himself from others. According to Lysenko, this behaviour stemmed from Nikita's deep-seated jealousy towards classmates from wealthier families. The increasing aloofness led to classmates picking on Nikita. Lysenko stated in court that these conflicts could have been avoided if Nikita had learned to stand up for himself. Instead, he responded to all provocations with threats, which earned him the school nickname Jimbo for 5 years, named after the character Jimbo Jones from the American cartoon series The Simpsons. Nina, Artem's mother, was wary of Nikita, fearing his influence on her son might be detrimental. After school, Nikita didn't pursue university. Instead, he just hopped around a few different colleges, resulting in either being expelled or dropping out. Despite their different paths, the boys shared a disturbing interest. They were fascinated by the lives of serial killers. They were particularly intrigued by the Blood Magic Gang, a group founded in 2007 by a 22-year-old named Konstantin Shumakov. The gang, also based in Irkutsk, was known for murdering 5 homeless people and committing 1 assault in 2008. Also, they established an online group christened Pushyskin for President, a homage to Alexander Pushyskin, another notorious murderer who was responsible for a minimum of 49 homicides in Moscow's Bista Park from 1992 to 2006. Displaying their eerie captivation with such heinous deeds, Nikita and Artem posted a tribute on the anniversary of the death of Andrei Chikatilo, another high-profile serial killer, accompanied by the words, "Rest in peace." This act reflected their perverse fascination for such violent actions. The 2 teenagers tried to collaborate on a music project, forming bands called Evil Gnomes and Dismembered Pugacheva. The lyrics for their songs made it clear that they had a disturbing fascination with violence. However, they maintained an angelic facade in front of their relatives and acquaintances, not showing any overt signs of aggression. Over time, all of their former peers distanced themselves from the duo, leaving Artem and Nikita as each other's only companions. During this period, both boys' relationships with their family members also deteriorated. Artem was constantly in dispute with his mother, to the point that their arguments could be heard by their neighbours. He was heard shouting, "I hate everyone," and "I'll kill you," could be heard, coupled with unusual noises that sounded like he was either punching the wall or throwing himself against it. It is highly likely that he was physically assaulting his mother, as neighbours occasionally overheard, "Get off me, I'll hit you again now." During the investigation, Artem confessed that his relationship with his mother had become so tense that he feared he might lose control and kill her. Nikita, on the other hand, distanced himself from his mother, avoiding her presence and refraining from appearing with her in public. At the same time, Nikita's mental state was deteriorating. His communication with his family had all but ceased. His depressive symptoms worsened, and he started to struggle with insomnia. Artem, for a while, was associated with an extremist movement, even participating in a Russian march in 2010. Nikita, influenced by Artem, also interacted with this group, but he was rejected due to his Ossetian background. Justice Captain Yevgeny Kashevsky, who conducted the interrogation of both criminals, suggested during the investigation that the duo's spiraling descent from affiliating with extremist groups to committing murders was driven primarily by a simple desire for fame and attention. Their involvement with the extremist groups also played a significant role when a fellow member, Friedrich Oberschulz, introduced them to a particular book titled Born to Hate. Intrigued by the literature, as it resonated with their own psychological state, the pair perceived it as a potential solution to their personal issues. This introduction, in reality, further nurtured their misanthropy. It's important to mention that their infatuation with other infamous murderers also played a part in their inclination towards violence. They were particularly intrigued by the not-proper Trosk maniacs, Viktor Sianko and Igor Sopronyuk, a fascination that later drove them to record their own heinous acts. They even dedicated one of their albums of their noisecore band, Dismembered Pugacheva, in tribute to the duo. With the album's introduction, they made their intentions clear, openly expressing their aspiration to continue in the footsteps of the Blood Magic Gang and Net Proper Trosk maniacs' footsteps. As they put it, they wanted to continue their legacy. They said this, and quote, "We'll continue the work, not only in a musical sense, but also in a real sense. There is no place for posers in our group. Only those who decide the fate of the cattle, or are just about to start serious actions, are allowed. If you are determined, you are here." It was at this point, having lost their friends and distanced themselves from their families, with only each other for company, they descended on a series of brutal murders. Their isolation from the outside world allowed their destructive tendencies to take hold unchallenged, resulting in a violent and disturbing spree of crime. Artem and Nikitia would embark on a daily ritual, walking the same route from the State University bus stop to Akademgorodok between 6 and 10 p.m. They were patient in their horrific pursuit, allowing possibly 5, 10 or even 20 people to pass by until they found the victim, who, to them, seemed right. It was not uncommon for them to walk this route for a week without attacking anyone. As the investigator, Yevgeny Kachevsky, stated in court, they were led by an urge, guided by an internal voice. The pair carried out their heinous acts under the cover of darkness, late in the evening, overnight, or in the early hours of the morning, capitalizing on the fact that their mothers frequently worked night shifts. Various weapons were utilized throughout their murder spree, including rubber mallets, hammers, baseball bats, and knives. Over the course of their interrogation, Artem confessed that he was typically the one to deliver the initial blows, while Nikita was the first to desecrate the bodies. The pair would complete their gruesome acts together, administrating anywhere between 15 and 20 blows to each victim. Given that Artem and Nikita always launched their attacks from the rear, the surviving victims of the so-called hammermen couldn't provide the investigation with specific details that could readily lead to their identification. At most, the victims had only caught fleeting glimpses of their attackers, and they couldn't even recall their voices. And this is how they managed to commit so many attacks. The first attack took place on November 14th, 2010, with the victim being 18-year-old Anastasia Markovzago. After being struck on the head, she collapsed but feigned death, a tactic that ultimately saved her from her assailants. Notably, they didn't take anything from her. Anastasia quickly reported the attack to the police, but they declined to initiate a criminal investigation on the grounds that nothing had been stolen. Even though Anastasia was able to recall and describe certain features of her attackers, her testimony was disregarded. Consequently, she decided to share her ordeal on her town's internet forum. Upon seeing her post, Artem and Nikita engaged in a conversation with her online, asking her about her experiences during the attack and how she felt after it. Their actions exhibit a shocking level of audacity and cold-heartedness. Instead of feeling fear or guilt after their first attack, they engaged with their victim online, showing a complete lack of empathy. Just 10 days after the initial attack, the duo struck again. This time, their target was a middle-aged woman. They ambushed her from behind, only halting their assault when a car drove by. They quickly retreated, and whilst doing so, they stole her bag. But the authorities did not connect this to the previous attack, and it was merely categorized as a robbery. After the earlier attacks, Artem and Nikita spotted a 12-year-old named Daniil Semyonov, who was heading out to ride a snow scooter. Semyonov was known to them as he attended the same school. Seeing him as a weak and defenseless target, they followed him and attacked. Nikita offered to make the first blow, which Artem agreed to. So Nikita hit Semyonov using a mallet over the back of the head. As the boy fell, Artem continued the assault with a baseball bat. Evidence of a hematoma on Daniel's hand suggested that he had either tried to defend himself or had been aggressively gripped by one of the assailants. The gruesome attack ended with Nikita driving a penknife into Daniel's temple. Brutal. By the time the boy was discovered by his mother and brother, he was still somehow clinging to life. An ambulance was called, but it was delayed in traffic. Tragically, by the time help arrived, Semyonov had succumbed to his injuries. At the time of Semyonov's tragic death, nobody suspected that he was a victim of murder, including his parents. The case was originally misclassified as an accident, with officials attributing the boy's severe injuries to a high-speed collision with a birch tree. However, the credibility of this explanation was questionable. The incline from which he had been riding was only a slight 10 degrees, and his snow scooter was found without any signs of damage. According to former investigator Maxim Konyak, who worked on this case, there was no evidence on the snow that could have caused Semyonov's lethal head injuries. A criminal case was not opened at that time due to these assumptions. Only later did Artem and Nikita confess to this horrific act, stating chillingly that they used the young boy as a mere and quote practice for their future crimes. This marked Semyonov as their first murder victim. A few weeks after Semyonov's death, another fatal assault took place. On December 16th, 2010, the body of Olga Pirog, a 69-year-old senior researcher, was discovered just 20 meters away from where Semyonov was killed. Olga's murder was carried out in a manner similar to Semyonov's, but she was dispatched more swiftly, a technique later adopted for their subsequent victims. During this particular attack, the perpetrators made an audio recording. It chillingly captured their conversations about their murderous intentions, followed by the actual recording of the killing process. Olga was found with approximately 30 stab wounds, indicating a savage and brutal assault, yet her money and jewellery were left undisturbed. Whilst in the midst of their murderous spree, Artem and Nikita didn't just commit horrifying crimes, they revelled in them on social media. They shockingly detailed their offences online and even bragged about their ruthlessness. Artem chillingly wrote on his personal social media page, and quote, "We are gods. We decide who will live and who will die." They also engaged in what can only be described as recruitment talks, with various users visiting their pages and groups. In a conversation with a user named Yura Anafriv, they suggested he kill the janitor as a form of practice and psychological preparation, though later, at the trial, Artem claimed it was his friend who had this conversation from his account. However, when investigators later interviewed all the users that Artem and Nikita had corresponded with, it emerged that most of them hadn't taken the duo seriously. They believed that the pair were claiming other people's murders to draw attention to themselves. Seized during the investigation, Artem's entire correspondence with potential recruits amounted to 4,600 pages of printed text. On December 29th, 2010, Artem and Nikita attacked Inessa Svetlova. Fortunately, They only managed to snatch her bag before she escaped, but the two teens were still hungry for blood, and just an hour later, at 7 p.m, they encountered a 35-week pregnant Ekaterina Karpova, a local sports school coach, and her 6-year-old niece, Olya Averina. They were returning to their home near Akademgorodok when they met Artem and Nikita near a railway line. Karpova was on a phone call and didn't notice them, and as they crossed the railroad, the duo attacked. Olya managed to escape, albeit with extensive bruising to her liver area from a blow Nikita had landed. Despite Ekaterina's pleas that she was pregnant, they smashed her head off a rock and broke her fingers. However, a car suddenly appearing from around the nearest corner scared the attackers away, saving Ekaterina and potentially Olya. On January 1st, 2011, at about 5 o'clock in the morning, Artem and Nikita attacked a homeless man who was alone in a back alley near some garbage containers. They mercilessly attacked him using mallets, striking him more than 40 times and fracturing his skull in multiple places. Despite the extreme brutality of the assault, the man miraculously survived the attack, only to later succumb to his injuries in the hospital. It's incredibly heartbreaking that the victim's identity could not be determined, leading him to be labelled as simply corpse number 20. They stole not just his life, but his individuality and humanity as well. At the end of the same month, on January 30th, 2011, Artem and Nikita assaulted Oleg Semyonov, a student coming home from a nightclub. Despite suffering lacerated head wounds, a concussion and a cranium injury, Semyonov was able to escape. Just days later, on February 1st, 2011, the duo attacked an elderly woman who was later hospitalised with an open head wound. But what is most horrifying is that their attacks are becoming more frequent. They have absolutely no remorse. In fact, it seems they only had a growing appetite for murder. On February 21st, 2011, the killers carried out a brutal attack on Alexander Maximov, who was heading home in a state of intoxication after being at a friend's house. An air pistol was fired at the back of his head by Nikita, and Artem attempted but failed due to his lack of knowledge of human anatomy to gouge out the victim's eyes. The teens smashed Alexander's head in, and his jaws and skull were also completely broken. The extent of Alexander's injuries was so severe that he was buried in a closed coffin without his head, the remains of which were retained as crucial evidence in the investigation. On February 27th, 2011, Nikita this time acted alone when he targeted Nina Kuzmina, who was seated on a bench near where she lived. He struck her twice on the head, but when she cried out in response, a nearby resident was alerted and peered out of their window. Startled by a potential witness, Nikita hastily fled the scene, snatching Nina's mobile phone in the process. On the night of March 11th, 2011, near the State University bus stop and practically right outside Artem's apartment building, the killers ambushed a homeless man called Roman Fazulin. Artem shot the man in the face using an air pistol. Together with Nikita, they hauled the body into the bushes and began to savagely stab him with knives in the groin, head and chest area. Nikita attempted to sever his hand, but the small size of the knife meant he could only cut off the pinky finger. Afterwards, Artem took photographs of the corpse and the ensuing blood trail from the window of his apartment. During the remaining days of March, 2 more assaults occurred. The exact dates are not known. In one incident, they targeted a homeless woman who survived due to the timely arrival of a police officer who spotted the crime from his apartment. In another event, they assaulted a woman in a crowded archway using a screwdriver in place of a knife. However, fearing attention, they hastily stabbed her a few times before fleeing with her bag, leaving her alive. On April 1st, 2011, the Academy maniacs killed their 6th and final victim, this time being 63-year-old homeless woman Alftina Koidina. It is believed that she was stabbed to death. At this point in time, the teens were so cocky and sure that they would never be caught. In fact, so much so that they even filmed some of the horrific acts they inflicted on their last victim, emboldened by the recordings of their previous attacks, and seemingly inspired heavily by the Dnipropetrovsk maniacs and their similar film, 3 Guys, 1 Hammer. Artem and Nikita began filming their engagement in further deplorable acts. In the video, Nikita, who is being filmed by Artem, approached what initially seemed like a pile of rubbish. On closer inspection, however, a woman's lifeless body comes into view. Her jaw appeared to have been brutally crushed, presumably by a hammer or mallet, and she bore multiple stab wounds. Nikita, using a knife, laboriously severed the woman's earlobe after several attempts. He then prodded the woman's head with the blade, making careful efforts to avoid getting blood on him. He even vocalized his concerns about the blood. With a chilling lack of compassion, Nikita jammed the knife into her eye socket, attempting to remove the eyeball, but failing. He then plunged the knife into the victim's mouth. His disgusting laughter is audible in the footage. The duo discarded the severed earlobe on the premises of their school. The graphic video they made was sent by Artem to an online associate from St. Petersburg, Ilya Ustinov, known online as Solomon Goyo. Despite deeming the video underwhelming, Ustinov shared it online, and it soon spread like wildfire throughout the internet and the local community. At this point, the town's inhabitants were gripped by fear, fully aware that they had a serial killer or potentially multiple serial killers on the loose. In the early stages of the investigation, misinformation about the nature and pattern of the murders caused widespread panic. This led to the townspeople to predominantly believe in the theory that the gruesome acts were being perpetrated by a single deranged individual, presumed to be around 30 years old. Despite the escalating violence, Artem and Nikita never once fell under suspicion. They held good reputations within their community, and it was beyond comprehension for many that such heinous acts could be committed by anyone local. However, as there was a number of survivors from the Academy Maniacs attacks, composite sketches of the suspects were created and published throughout the area. Intriguingly, an elderly factory worker recognised her own grandson in one of the sketches. Torn between her doubts and the unsettling recognition, she decided to involve her son, Vladislav, the boy's uncle. Upon visiting his nephew's apartment, where the teen lived with his mother, Vladislav stumbled upon a camera, one that he had gifted his nephew just a few days prior. Curious, he decided to inspect its content, only to be met with a chilling discovery. Stored in the camera was a video showing his nephew and his friend savagely murdering a woman. Shocked and repulsed, Vladislav immediately took the video to the police. Before long, his nephew Nikita and his friend Artem were apprehended by law enforcement. The trial of Artem and Nikita spanned over 2 years, and it was marked by several perplexing moments. Given that Nikita was underage at the time when most of the murders took place, he could potentially receive a more lenient sentence. Also, he did not deny his guilt and confessed to all the murders. Artem, on the other hand, admitted to only 2 killings, of which he was captured on the incriminating video. His admission was largely due to the weight of the evidence against him, which made it virtually impossible to maintain his innocence. Nonetheless, public sentiment leaned towards the idea that Nikita was heavily influenced by Artem. Many believed Artem was the primary instigator and planner behind the majority of the heinous acts. However, just before the sentence was handed down, Nikita made an unexpected revelation. He claimed that there were other individuals involved in the murders. Yet, a week later, he abruptly retracted his statement, admitting that he and Artem were the sole perpetrators. This sudden shift led some to speculate that he invented the story out of resentment towards the media portraying him as simply someone who was easily manipulated, and that Artem was the intelligent one. A witness during the trial testified that he was privy to the horrific acts committed. He became acquainted with the teens through their shared nationalist ideology, and Artem had confided in him about several of the killings. Despite this knowledge, the witness refrained from reporting to the police, as his girlfriend was living next door to Artem and he was fearful for her well-being. The witness also made the startling claim that Artem had plotted to murder Nikita and moved to St. Petersburg to continue his string of violent crimes there. During the trial, Artem initially displayed a defiant attitude, meticulously recording witness testimonies and lodging complaints about the undue pressure from investigators and judges. However, as the gravity of the case dawned on him, his defiance shifted into a panic, and he began sporadically slashing his wrists, sometimes even within the courtroom. Nikita, on the other hand, remained emotionless throughout the proceedings. The court eventually sentenced Artem to life imprisonment, while his accomplice, Nikita, received a 24-year sentence, which was later reduced to just 20 years. The leniency of Nikita's sentence was due to him being a minor during the time of the crimes. The court likely also took into account Artem's substantial influence over Nikita, as well as his expression of remorse for his actions. In a letter addressed to the local newspaper, the Irkutsk Reporter, Nikita confessed his guilt and readiness to face punishment. He expressed a desire to undo his actions and vowed never to repeat such crimes. However, when the time came for him to make his final statement in court, Nikita chose to remain silent. In stark contrast, Artem chose to read from a pre-written script. He offered his apologies to the families of the deceased and the victims. However, amidst his apologies, he tried to defend himself, maintaining that he was only involved in 2 of the 6 murders that were attributed to him. Artem also stated emphatically that he did not plead guilty to the desecration of bodies, asserting that he merely filmed it. He offered a concise explanation for his horrifying actions, saying, "I don't know why I did it. I don't know what came over me." After the verdict was announced, Artem collapsed on the bench, sobbing uncontrollably. Nikita, on the other hand, displayed no outward emotion. Once Artem recovered, he leapt to his feet and shouted at the victims, directing his words primarily towards his investigator. "Well, are you satisfied?" His taunt was met with a heart-wrenching reply from the mother of one of his victims. She said, "Were you happy when you took my son's life?" Artem appears to have adjusted quite comfortably to his prison environment, maintaining a network of correspondence with pen pals. His only grievances appear to be about a lack of a television and recreational activities. But in stark contrast, Nikita was found in the early morning of December 2021. He ended things himself, even though he was due for parole in 2031. It may have been the combined burden of his guilt, mixed with the harsh reality of prison life in the colony, that proved just too overwhelming for him. That's the end of this episode. Until next time, stay sane.